Hello and welcome to Ikike Digest, your learning space on Home FTV. I'm Kome Odomo. On Ikike Digest, we aim to continuously bring to light environmental issues as it affects communities and our food system. We also highlight policy gaps that do not meet the needs of our people and provide our listeners with accurate environmental information. And in today's edition, we will be looking at Africa in the current global geopolitics, youth, and development agenda. Africa positions itself in evolving landscape of global geopolitics, which continues to grow. The continent continues to grow in influence. It is vital to explore the role of youths and the development agenda shaping Africans' future. Africa's youth population, which comprises over 60% of the continent's total, is a vibrant force driving social, political, and economic transformation. Their aspirations for improved education, employment, and increased involvement in governance are challenging traditional power structure. Focusing on global influence, African nations are expanding their diplomatic and economic partnerships. Initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area showcases efforts to boost Africa's intra-African trade and reduces reliance on traditional power. In today's edition, we want to examine the opportunities, the challenges, and innovative approaches that defines African path in the 21st century. And we have in the studio Dr. Roland Ngam to provide a deeper understanding of the topic under this discussion today. You're welcome, Dr. Ngam.
Thank you.
So let's talk about, before we go into the main topic, let's talk about these websites that you have designed to improve indigenous knowledge around science. What's it about?
Yeah, so really what is happening is that when you read a lot of media, when you read a lot of academic books, Africa's history starts in 1960. Africa's history starts with colonialism. African intelligence is always interpreted from different perspectives, often global north perspectives. And what we're trying to do is that we want to say that Africa has thousands of years worth of knowledge, and all this knowledge thrust should be brought in to develop the continent. All this knowledge thrust is what helped to build the pyramids, is what helped to invent the vaccine for chickenpox and many other conditions. And so all the skills and knowledge that we have really should be showcased. I don't like using that word, but let's use it now. Showcase and really to show everybody, especially young Africans, that we do not have to import knowledge, we do not have to import skills, we do not have to import notions of development because we already have them here on the continent.
Okay, so before the end of the program, we'll talk more about these websites and how people would have access to them. So looking at this now, how is Africa positioning itself in the current global geopolitical landscape, especially with the rising power and shifting alliances?
Well, it is an interesting dance at the moment. An interesting dance because we have the global north powers that are waning, and at the same time we have a shift to the east. And so there is a tug of war between the east and the west, but Africa also positioning itself, as you can see, in the BRICS coalition. And so it is a very interesting time in global geopolitics because the continent is emerging and it is also trying to shape its own future.
So what are the key priorities of African development agenda? Focus, especially, how do they align with the global goals, like the sustainable development goals and the rest of them?
I think it is very disappointing. Let's not kid ourselves. There is an official position, and this is amongst the African leaders. If you look at Agenda 2063, the continent wants to be fully integrated, fully developed, great opportunities for boys and girls by 2063. And so you have an official positioning amongst our current crop of political leaders that really espouses those goals. But if you look at the unofficial position, the one I'm more excited about, really, we are talking about the ideals of Nelson Mandela, the ideals of Marcus Garvey, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, of really strong independence, an Afrocentric perspective, an Afrocentric outlook on how we do everything from art to cooking and eating to making clothes to teaching our children, etc., etc.
Yeah, so considering that Africa has the youngest population, the youths, the youngest population, so how can African youths be involved in shaping policies and driving innovations across the continent?
Unfortunately, really, for me, exclusion is rejection. Exclusion is undermining. Exclusion is minimizing. Exclusion is really a kind of seizure, really, a confiscation of young people's future. The average young African wants really to leave the continent. And we have to ask ourselves why last year, for example, in one day, over 100,000 young Africans landed in Lampedusa. This is really very frustrating. And the reason why young people are behaving that way is because the older generation have excluded them from participating in their country's development. And so that kind of exclusion, which is rejection, which is minimizing, is really what is leading to the stagnation that we see on the continent. Is really what we can see as someone, Ikike Ama, wrote, the beautiful ones are not yet born, you know, and in his mind, you can see what is happening in Africa. The fact that everywhere you go, you see all this litter in the streets, you see everything, all this haphazard type development, chaos, and so on. A lot of all of that is really because Africa is inhabited by apathy. Africa is inhabited by a lot of fatalism. People believing that it was written in the stars that we should be poor, we should be haggard, we should be unfortunate, etc., etc., etc. And so a lot of that has happened over a very long period of time, but very fortunately, through social media, through organizing and talking to fellow young Africans in different parts of the continent, we can see that people are rejecting this way, this reality. They are rejecting this reality and they want to write a new future for themselves. They are not waiting for paradise in the hereafter. They want to build their paradise here and now.
So how does this demography, how does it affect the continent's strategies, especially in politics, economics, and the rest?
So we can see, like I mentioned, that unfortunately Africa, which is 60 to 70% young people, and so we have 70% more or less of young people who are not being included in decision-making processes. 70% of young people who are not included in helping build their continent's future. And because of that, we have a political class that has confiscated all the good homes, confiscated all the good quality hospitals, confiscated happiness, confiscated, etc., etc., etc. And so we have a new organizing that is very socialist in nature, and young people who are saying that they want quality education for all, quality living conditions for all, quality homes, quality education, quality everything. And this is being done mainly, for example, in West Africa, you see the anti-CFA franc movement, which more or less led to the Malian failed revolution because Assimi Goïta came to power through a coalition built by young people under the reggae DJ Rasbat. And also in Kenya, we have the movement which happened to stop President Ruto from increasing taxes. In Nigeria, for example, we have the NSAS movement. And I can go on and on. In the DRC, we also have the La Lucha movement, which pushed Kabila out of power. Something similar as well happened in Senegal with former President Wade, and before him as well. And so young people are building coalitions to change the continent. And that is something we are happy to see, that active agency.
So you mentioned some obstacles that are limiting Africa from leveraging its youths and resources. But for emphasis sake, we really would like to know what's these some of these other significant obstacles that is leveraging Africa, that is limiting Africa from leveraging its resources in the global arena.
There's a couple of things. Obviously, in the 1980s, with structural adjustment, what happens in Africa is that many countries are put under Bretton Woods institution policies. And a lot of this brings in austerity. And this austerity really means that most governments are obliged, if you will, to cut spending on social programs, especially education, housing, health, etc. Because of that, there has been a very limited program across the entire continent.
True.
So growth has been very limited, there has been no creativity. And because there has been no creativity, like the Nigerian sociologist Claude Ake once said, we have systems where austerity leads to autocracy. And it leads to autocracy because the political class that has nothing to offer young people wants to stay in power. And because they want to stay in power, they then become more repressive. And this is something we have witnessed for the longest time. And because of structural adjustment, something else happened. A lot of money left the African continent. And because of that happening, the continent really could not generate money quickly enough under the very rigid economic systems that we have. Very little creativity. And so, by and large, until China emerged in the early 2000s, there was very little infrastructure being developed. There was very little by way of rail, roads, airports, and so on. So China really, we have to be very happy about this fact, has propelled the significant growth that we have had post-2000. And also a few countries getting their act together as well, we have to admit that. But by and large, it has been really very limiting, very boring. Africa really has not been moving quickly enough. And you can see that in one area, which is always, very unfortunately, the one that we have to always keep quoting, 600 Africans lack electricity. In most of Africa, life ends after 6 p.m. The continent really is not integrated. To move in parts of the continent, in most parts of the continent, you need passports, you need visas, etc., etc.
It shouldn't be so.
And so, which shouldn't be so. And so for that reason, unfortunately, our development is arrested. Our development is arrested. And because our development is arrested, the young people want to go.
We'll go on a short break, and when we return, we will continue the conversation in around Africa in the current global geopolitics. Stay tuned.
Home FTV, I just want to congratulate you guys. You're doing so very well. We've seen you in the corridors of power here at COP, and now this is COP 30, and we see you speaking to the people, giving power to truth, and we just really want to say thank you for giving us the platform, especially from a country like yours. Nigeria is such a critical aspect or part of the climate movement, the climate transition. And we want to see Nigeria really leading from an African perspective. We've seen incredible strides coming out of the country. I think this year was 30 years of no drilling in Ogoni, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's an incredible achievement. We need to see more of that, keeping more oil in the ground, because at this point we haven't seen any progress. You know, when we speak about progress and development, a lot of countries want to say oil is the way, but is it really? You know, if it's affecting communities negatively. And people like Home FTV, you need to start, you need to continue with the work that you're doing, because you're doing incredible things. Thank you, bye.
Welcome back. You've been listening to Dr. Roland Ngam, a postdoctoral research fellow in the Emancipatory Future Studies. Well, before we went on the break, you were talking about the trajectory of how Africans have been marginalized and put in a cage. So we'd like to know what's your outlook on Africa's geopolitical future and the role of youths in steering this process.
Amongst young Africans now, there's something that is emerging very clearly: Pan-Africanism. Young people want a Pan-Africanist type, eco-socialist type future. And they see this through the ideals of Marcus Garvey, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, for example, who planted about 1 million trees in something like 2 weeks. They see this in the ideals of people like Winnie Mandela, who fought for non-racialism, Wangari Maathai, for example. They see and try to enact these policies right now across West Africa, where you see, for example, young people demanding the end of the CFA franc. So neocolonialism really has to end. Neocolonialism really has to end. And this has been the message of young Africans. Beyond that, we also have a kind of global South type, Bandung type, non-aligned type future being imagined by countries like South Africa. And so South Africa, for example, which is a member of the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa plus, BRICS plus, which is really great to see. But obviously beyond that, we also have the East-West tug of war between the United States and China, and African countries trying to play to see where they get the most benefits. And really it is through that we are going to try and build the future.
Yes, so what role do international relations and foreign investments play in Africa's development and political stability?
So, Kome, this, as you know, those who pay you more or less, yes. And so we've seen a lot of this in one Kwame Nkrumah really wrote in his book, Neocolonialism, the last stage of capitalism. And we have seen this in how countries like France dictate development in the CFA franc zone. Because they control the CFA franc, they control more or less at what pace you are developing, because they have set your exchange rate. You see how Japan fluctuates its currency based on how fast or how slowly it wants to develop, and that is good for Japan. The CFA frank countries cannot do that, for example. And so that is one frame of geopolitics that young Africans across the entire CFA zone want to end. At the same time, we also have a type of international geopolitics that is emerging in the AES countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. But unfortunately, I do not believe, although most people are really happy about this, they believe that this is some form of new Pan-Africanism. But I personally believe that presidents like Traore and Assimi Goïta are doing it really to stay in power. They are not doing it for the young people. Because all the social movements that brought these people to power, the leaders of all those social movements are in prison now. And so that is another aspect. What I'm more passionate about, the kind of geopolitics and the kind of future that I am passionate about, is the organizing that young people are doing in Kenya, the organizing that young people are doing within La Lucia in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the organizing, for example, that young women are doing across the entire continent in organizing book clubs and developing theories about how the young African girl, the young girl child has to behave or get educated in order to live a fulfilled life on the continent.
So from where you stopped about the book, reading the book club thing, you recently launched a book where you co-authored or you had a chapter in the geopolitics of green colonialism. Can this be tied to the present conversation that we're having?
Yes, so beyond development, the thinking collective, the think tank or loose network of researchers to which I belong, published a series of books, including the geopolitics of green colonialism. And the idea behind that is that we have to move beyond this extractivist development paradigm that we have. We have to move beyond the consumerism that we live in today. We have to move beyond the GMO type of agricultural production that we live in today. We have to envision a new type of world where the wealth is distributed evenly amongst all the people on earth. This is really key, especially from a global south perspective. Much of the global north was developed by the global south.
True.
And so you have, for example, those who were sold into slavery, so chattel slavery developing many countries. And at the same time as well, you also have the resources that are taken from countries within a colonial type, imperialist type paradigm to develop other continents. And when that happens, obviously you've seen that in books like Capital by Thomas Piketty, Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, etc., etc., Sylvester Williams, and so on. And while that has developed the global north, the global south really has remained in a state of underdevelopment. And so we moved straight from undevelopment to underdevelopment. And the only way for that to change, and you can see this in international geopolitics today, where much of the global north is moving far right in their politics. Building fences will not solve the problem. The only way to solve the problem is to help fix some of the development challenges that we have. And this has to be done within a new type green Marshall Plan type strategy. With the global north, for example, which reparations is the answer, but the intelligent way to do that is to really do massive investments in green projects in the global south. For example, we can end energy poverty in the global south very quickly. helping global south countries provide energy access for all citizens, helping the global south end dirty cooking. Everywhere across Africa, you'll see charcoal. This is really one of our biggest problems. If we can help Africans with clean cooking, helping invest massively in getting access, internet access, in connecting Africa, building roads, building rail systems, and so on. These is really the kind of green socio-ecological transformation that Africa needs right now. Clean cooking, clean travel, clean living, clean education, and so on. Funded by reparations, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you what encouraging policies you have for sustainable development, but apparently you have answered them in this very last question. But I do not know if you have more thoughts, so I would allow for you to give me your parting shot and your closing word.
Yes, so at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, the kind of socio-ecological transformation policies that I encourage really are nature-based solutions and Afrocentric, Africa-centric type solutions. In other words, we have a lot of the answers that we seek. Through African storytelling, a lot of the education that we have as Africans was passed down from generation to generation. Through fabric making, we Africans learned to produce amazing art that was looted for thousands of years. Through intelligence and water management, we live in the deserts of Namibia, for example. And so you can see that we have a lot of intelligent solutions in the way we live. You can see the mud huts of the Musgum in Chad and Cameroon, which keep the temperature down even in 40-degree weather. And so what we try and do is really to show that we have the science to move forward, but we need the investment through reparations, through loss and damage within the Conference of the Parties processes, so that Africans, young Africans, can start dreaming again, so that young Africans can see that there is a future here and now.
You've heard it. Africa's story is one of resilience, potential, and opportunity, a narrative that requires collective efforts for a forward-thinking leadership. You've been listening to Dr. Roland Ngam, who is a postdoctoral research fellow in the Emancipatory Future Studies. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's edition. We do hope that you found it very interesting and engaging, and there are ways to which we can move forward as a continent in Africa. Thank you very much, Dr. Roland, for availing us with your time. And we do hope that when we call on you in our subsequent edition, you'll be available to give us more of your in-depth knowledge.
Oh, certainly. It was a pleasure and always ready to chat with you.
Thank you very much. Please join us in our next episode as we continue to talk about other environmental issues. But before then, remember to visit our website, www.homef.org, and follow us on all our social media handles on Echo Homef. I remain your host, Kome Odomo. Thank you.